Yeah, so my answer on whether they're good or not is really, it depends. My name is Layne Walters. I'm an investment-focused mortgage broker in Calgary. I work with REI Hub. I've been asked a lot lately about my experience, or do I have clients that are making a lot of money with Airbnb rentals? And yeah, here's some of my thoughts and opinions on Airbnb rentals, where they work, where they don't, and what to watch for. When it comes to Airbnb or short-term rentals as a strategy, my personal opinion on it is it's actually just a part-time job, because what you actually have to do is you just have to work a lot harder. You have to go there, show up, change sheets, do laundry, clean the place, replace it. And that's basically just a part-time job. So of course, if you're doing a couple of times a week, you're doing a part-time job, you're gonna make more money. And if you add that up over the cycle of a month, you end up putting in a lot of hours, including your drive time and management, and you are gonna make more money. But it's also because you're working more hours, so you might as well just get a part-time job. Now, having said that, sometimes you can house hack, or if it's the other side of a duplex you already own, or you got a really cool downtown property, and there can be some advantageous ways to make that work. But generally, if you could say hire that out, because that's the suggestion that you get from a lot of people as well, there are companies that'll actually do it for you, and that's true, but they're just doing the work for you. So if it turns out that everybody could just hire an Airbnb company or short-term rental company to do all that management for them, and they still made way more than their regular rental, then of course everybody, including me, would switch all of my properties over to those types of properties, because I'd make way more money. And the second I do that, and everybody else does that, the market gets flooded and then prices come down. So it's a market-driven approach. So there are times when it works, but if it works too well for any length of time, more people will start doing it and the market will sort itself out. It will end up working out to making a little bit more money if you end up hiring someone to manage it. It'll make maybe a little bit more money, or about the same as just having it as a regular long-term rental. So I would argue it's a market force. So, and everybody can do it. Everybody could just hire a company and do this, with the exception of the restrictions on properties, in condo buildings that don't allow it. But for the most part, the market is going to flatten that extra profitability out of it. So even if you want to try it, and you have the ability to do that, and it's a great way for you to get into real estate or to house hack, I would make sure that if you're doing it as an actual investment strategy, that you do so keeping in mind that the strategy may stop working, and that property is something that you can at least turn into a good long-term rental. So some people will bring up the restrictions and the barriers to entry, and there is some, and that can actually make it a little bit more profitable because of the risk end of it. You do have to outlay a bunch of cost for furniture, and you can't just get a bunch of mixed match old furniture. You got to buy something that looks reasonably new, but is also reasonable, in terms of its quality. So then you add that onto the fact that you have to apply for a business license to do it in the city of Calgary now, or if you don't, there's certainly risks around it, and it actually makes it hard to use platforms like Airbnb unless you have a business license. So there are some barriers to entry that make that potential risk of it not working out possibly create some version of extra profitability in there for you, because it is something that someone looks at and says, hey, I can make a little bit more money doing it this way, but then I got to outlay $40,000 plus go through the hassle with the city to try and increase my profit. That's a pretty big bump for people, and people can probably do it, maybe they can do it for $15,000 or $20,000 if they're cheap with it or frugal and they can find ways to make it work. But that is still also a barrier to entry. But I still ultimately feel that if the profit is good enough for long enough, that more people will simply start doing it, or the people doing it will start, leasing out directly from landlords, and maybe you can lease to some of these companies, and maybe they'll reach out to people with good properties. But I still ultimately think there's never going to be an excessive amount of profit over and above a regular rental for a long period of time, because the market forces will just generate more supply in that scenario. So the question is there some properties that are better for Airbnb? And I would argue obviously yes, and that if you end up with a property, maybe it's the property that you actually live in because you like to live in a really trendy area, or maybe it's by a convention center venue or trendy area of town that's always, and maybe it's just got some cool features to the property that look cool, look great at an ad. And if people are gonna come on vacation, that's the style of property they want, that's walkable to everywhere, but also just looks like a trendy, cool, old brick warehouse building or something to that effect that may not be good, may not give you extra profit as a regular rental, but would give you definitely extra profit as an Airbnb. So that would be a property. And this is where I say, don't go into Airbnb, don't go into purchasing a property like that necessarily if you're dependent on extra Airbnb income, because that might not get you the same extra rent as a long-term rental. But if you already have a property like that, or you're buying it for a specific, or you're buying it for yourself, and that's one of the floors of a unit or an old century house that you're buying works for that, then obviously there can be some great advantage. So there are certain aspects, certain properties just definitely work far better as Airbnb. Those properties, I would argue, are probably more expensive and wouldn't necessarily be as good for long-term rentals, which means building up a portfolio of those types of properties carry with it not only the legislative risk around Airbnbs, though I think that's largely being flattened out. I do think that, and that just means the rules change and prohibit them, but I think that building a strategy around that could make you profit, but if it ever becomes less profitable, it will be more challenging to transition those types of properties. If you paid an extra premium for that property because you knew you could get it on Airbnb, swapping that over might put you into a negative cash flow position for that same type of long-term rental. Yeah, so my answer on whether they're good or not is really, it depends. It depends on the property, the person, how much time they have, what stage of their investing career they're at, and also the city that they happen to live in. So there's people that have lost money, there's people that have made mistakes, there's people that have overextended, and there are also a lot of people that actually make a pretty good living doing that in adjacent to buying, longer term rentals. So I guess I'd encourage anybody that actually has experience with this, put your comments below on what's worked for you in your Airbnb, or if you disagree with what I've said, feel free to put that in there as well. But yeah, I'd love to hear your comments on whether, if you made some mistakes there that you'd love to see other people avoid, or if you have any opinions on, where you've found a great way to make money. So yeah, leave some comments below, and thanks for watching.